Okay, so now we're being recorded. I am going to grant control of my desktop to Kelly.
The power.
Hey, look at that.
There we go. Great. What just happened? I think we're good. Are we good, Kathy?
I think we're good. Can you, yeah, if you can see, we're good. Here we go. There you go. Look at that.
Okay, so we'll get started. As Kathy said, my name is Kelly Charlebois, and I'm the Executive Director of TechACCESS, and we're in Rhode Island, but we are a program of HMEA, which is located in Franklin, Massachusetts. So we are familiar with Massachusetts. We do some work in Massachusetts. And I just wanted to talk briefly before I get into the actual piece of today's presentation. I wanted to talk briefly about the services that we provide both in Rhode Island and in Massachusetts. We are in the process of getting Mass Health approval. That's pending. We expect to hear within the next week whether or not we've been approved. And so we're looking forward to being able to provide a lot more services in Massachusetts using Mass Health as the billing mechanism for that. So we have a small staff here that consists of speech pathologists and occupational therapists, and also assistive technology practitioners who are certified in our field. So we do provide evaluations, consultations, and training, and we do that in a variety of areas. We have just our overall assistive technology, which looks at supporting folks who have difficulty with reading and written language, maybe performing tasks in a workplace environment, or supports that they may need with secondary education. And we also have augmentative communication consultants on staff who are speech pathologists who work with individuals who are nonverbal or have limited verbal ability. So we cover the entire spectrum of assistive technology services. We do offer a lot of professional development as well. So you'll see the website listed on this slide, and that professional development runs here throughout the course of the year. However, any training that we have or that you might need us to create, we can bring on site to you wherever you are. So that's one of the benefits of what we do. And then we also run an annual Assistive Technology Conference that happens in Rhode Island every November. It's a 2-day event. This year it's scheduled for
The conference has been muted.
Hold on, folks.
The conference has been muted. The conference has been unmuted.
Sorry about that. If you've got background noise, please mute yourself. You should be able to do that. Sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
Okay, no, that's fine. So again, that's kind of a brief summary of our services. All of our services are provided in the natural environment, so we don't bring folks here to perform evaluations or consultations, and any trainings that we do related to device implementation or support. Everything occurs in the natural environment. So that would be whether or not a person was in a group home or a workplace setting, any of those. Wherever the need is, that's where we're providing the services, which is kind of unique to us. So we're really happy to be able to do that. So that's a little bit about TechACCESS. The question about what is assistive technology, here's the formal definition, and essentially assistive technology is anything that we use to increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities of someone with a disability. So whether or not that's something that we purchase off the shelf, or it's a specialized piece of equipment that we purchase through a vendor or anywhere else, they all fall under that very vague umbrella of assistive technology. And what we're finding is that there's a lot of mainstream technology that we're able to use as assistive technology. And the best example of that would be an iPad, which probably many of you are using for your own personal reasons, but a lot of the folks that we provide services to are also utilizing iPads and apps that would qualify as assistive technology devices. So assistive technology is a really broad term, and what we find is that in this field it's constantly, just like any other type of technology. So when we look at what we want assistive technology to do for the individuals that we support, we're looking to do three things primarily, and that is increase the access that they have to their environment or to the tasks that they need to complete, to increase their independence, which obviously is one of the key factors of, there I am, which obviously is one of the key factors that we're looking at today, which is increasing independence. And then third, we're looking to increase communication for anybody who's having issues related to communication itself, whether that be in the form of, a social story or a visual schedule or a communication device. That's the other area that we're looking to kind of provide some support for. When we talk about high-tech versus low-tech, the preconceived idea out there is that high-tech is better. So we have lots of people who think that the more bells and whistles something has or the more things that it can do, the better off we are with it. And so when we talk about low-tech versus high-tech, one of the things that we'd like to point out is that most folks that we're working with are using a combination of both low-tech and high-tech. Low-tech tools themselves are usually more readily available. They're more readily available and they're easier for folks to manage more independently. The second point about using low-tech versus high-tech is that training needs and what we would consider a learning curve are much less significant with individuals using low-tech, and clearly the higher tech they get, the more support people generally need. That being said, we live in a very tech-savvy world, so some folks that we support need less training than others, and some teams that we work with who are supporting those individuals need less support than others. So it's definitely a variable thing. And then we mentioned what we like to do is a tiered approach to assistive technology, which is using...
The conference has been muted. The conference has been unmuted.
Kelly, I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute and ask everyone to mute themselves except for me and Kelly. Please ask questions via the chat function, folks. Go ahead, Kelly.
Okay. So again, just considering both low-tech and high-tech, not necessarily making an assumption that one is better than the other. It's a very individual decision. So one of the things that I wanted to point out is that when we're assessing individuals' needs for assistive technology, the different considerations that we have are looking at the needs of the individual, looking at the environment that they need to be performing in, and then looking at the tasks that they need to be, completing. So clearly those are different for folks, and very often we have to work with folks in multiple environments just to make sure that the technology that we're recommending is appropriate. So we may recommend some low-tech solutions for home, and then if we have an individual going out into the community for, say, a workplace performance issue, we might look at some higher tech or some different tech that people would need in order to complete those tasks. So again, everything's very individualized, and based on the needs of the individual and the environment that they're in.
All right, folks, I'm going to try to mute everybody and just unmute Kelly. I don't know how this is going to work. Hold on.
The conference has been muted.
Okay, go ahead, Kelly.
Okay. So when Kathy and I met to talk about this whole concept of bringing today together, one of the things that we talked about were identifying pieces of assistive technology that would be supporting folks in their homes. And so I tried to break things down into a few different categories and really just to get folks thinking about the kinds of technologies that we might use to increase some independence for folks that we provide services for in the home. So there's this great website called independentliving.com, and this is by no means a comprehensive list of what you could actually purchase. But there are things that we can do that are very low tech that will provide individuals with some safety and some independence. So they have an item called the pot minder, which is something that you just put in pots to prevent them from boiling over. It's a little disc that you just drop in at the beginning when you start cooking, and for some magical reason, it prevents pots from boiling over. One of my favorite tools from them is something called a liquid indicator, and what it does is it especially is good for hot beverages, but you hang it over the top of a mug or a cup, and as you're pouring liquid in, it has an indicator that lets you know when you're getting close to the top. It was originally designed for folks who have issues related to vision, where they may not be able to see, a clear liquid going into a clear glass. But what we found was that it also helps other individuals as well. So, and again, it's especially helpful when you're working with a hot liquid where you may not want, obviously you don't want boiling, water or something falling over into the top of the mug. They also have cut-resistant gloves, so if you have individuals that are cooking and using sharp knives, they can put these gloves on, which would prevent them from cutting themselves. They have oven guards, so that if you're taking items in and out of an oven, they actually slide along the rim, so if somebody reached in to grab it without an oven mitt on, they wouldn't actually get burned. They have a special microwave where you can press each of the buttons and it will give you an auditory cue of what the function is of that button, so that you can confirm that you're pressing the right button before you start the microwave. And then there's some very low-tech items that you can use in the kitchen. For example, you can use color-coded measuring cups and spoons. And then there are adapted utensils for folks who may have issues with motoric issues, so built-up spoons, knives and forks, those kinds of things. So very low-tech solutions. The other thing that we look at in terms of daily living is folks that need to be making phone calls to their loved ones or to some service providers or perhaps their doctor. Independent Living, as well as other manufacturers and companies, sell a voice-activated phone, which allows you to store 17 names in it, and then just speak, call doctor, call mom, and then it will automatically dial it. They also have picture phones where you can place photographs of family members next to the phones, and with a single push of the button, it will actually dial the phone. And then just in terms of other things related to daily living, like getting ready in the morning and knowing what the weather is like so that people dress appropriately, they do have at that website talking indoor and outdoor thermometers. So, again, if you have somebody who's not quite sure about what the weather might be like or how to dress, they can get the information from inside the home with a reading that's auditory if they need that support as well. So those are the types of things that we're looking at in terms of just, indoor cooking and daily living for home. Hopefully that all makes sense. And again, if you're just looking for a resource for those types of low-tech supports, Independent Living is a great resource, but there are certainly others out there as well. All right, moving on. One of the other things that Kathy and I had talked about was the importance of providing visuals for folks. So what I wanted to do is just give you a few resources in terms of visual recipes that are already developed and ready to go. out on the web. So there's there's 4 websites here that I like referring people to. They have everything from very simple, the steps needed to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, all the way up to, more complex dinner recipes that folks might be interested in. Some of them use photographs, some of them use picture and line drawings. All of them have a text base as well, so that if there are peers or roommates that are in the house that have the ability to read text and may not need the visual supports as much, they can actually read the recipe, while another individual might rely more on the visuals. So it's a nice collaboration of those 2 mediums for folks. And if you have individuals that are using an iPod Touch or an iPhone or an iPad, there's a great app called I Get Cooking, which is actually another, you see the little icon there. If there were apps, I tried to put icons because when you go online or to the App Store, they all start exactly alike. So for $4.99, it's an I Get Cooking app, and it's a step-by-step visual recipe again. And they're always adding to that. It's a really great app. I will warn you that if you do it on the iPhone, the recipe's really quite small, so the best way to view that would be an iPad mini or a full-sized iPad. So that is the I Get Cooking app. And for $5, it's not a bad deal. Okay, I just wanted to talk briefly about the Idevices that we're currently using with folks. There are certainly other tablets out there, but in terms of the world of assistive technology and the apps that are out there to really give people the most access to the types of apps that we're looking for when we make recommendations, we do tend to stick to the Idevices. So we're not only using iPads, we also do a lot with iPod Touches, especially for folks who are going out into the community because it's portable. You can get some really great heavy-duty cases for them, and they do seem a little bit more rugged than full-sized iPads. We're also doing a lot with the iWatch, and the challenge right now is that the apps that are available for that are relatively limited, but there are a lot of the built-in features that we can use for that. So if you have someone who just needs something, calendar reminders or access to quick texts or messages, the iWatch is actually a very nice option for a lot of folks. And it's the new gadget on the market, and the great thing about all of the Idevices is that they're mainstream technology. So folks don't mind carrying those around. Because they're not looking any different than anyone else. We have a question from Diane that's just asking me to explain what an iPod Touch is, and essentially an iPod Touch looks almost identical to an iPhone, but it doesn't have cellular service on it. So the iPod Touch was kind of the prerequisite to a lot of the other Idevices. And again, without the use of cellular, it's basically like having your iPod. So it does all of those same functions. They are thought of primarily as music devices. So lots of people still have an iPod that they keep all of their music on if they're trying to keep things a little bit separate. So that's what it is. So in terms of the Idevices, what's really nice about them, again, is that you can access the built-in features. Not on every device, but what they do have in common is that for all of them, we can set reminders for folks. So we might think of using them, to notify us 15 minutes before we have an important meeting that we don't want to forget, or something like that. But you can set multiple reminders throughout the course of the day that we could use for things like reminding people to take medications, reminding folks that they have to initiate a bedtime routine or a morning routine. We can use reminders in lots of different ways. And we can use the built-in calendar in the same way. So again, without purchasing anything else and just thinking a little bit creatively about how to use what's already available when you have these devices, there are lots of little tips and tricks that we can do. The other thing that I love using the iProduct for is FaceTime. So that without actually, if you're far away from a loved one, if you just want to check in, take a peek at, how they're doing and have basically a quote unquote face-to-face conversation, the use of FaceTime is great for that. So, a virtual check-in, if you will, with folks. They can turn their device around and you can actually see, what their kitchen looks like. You can check to see whether or not the stove's been turned off, all in real time, which is really great. We also have the opportunity to use videos, whether we create them or folks download them. They can have access to them in the moment. So, for example, if you have somebody who relies on videos for, social cueing or for different types of situations, they can have access to the video on their device and, kind of using earphones so that nobody is kind of aware of what they're doing. They can listen to the cues that are provided within that video for their social story or for their supports, whatever it is that they need. And then last but not least, there are a lot of accessibility features that are built into all Idevices, and they range from everything for supports for people that are visually impaired to folks who have hearing difficulties, and a lot of things are now being built in for individuals with motor disabilities as well. So a lot of things, again, that we can do with just the built-in accessibility features. And I wish I had more time to go into that. We do an actual 2-hour presentation on just tips and tricks for using the accessibility features that built in, but that's kind of just enough to get you thinking about how to use the technologies and the settings that are kind of already built into devices that many folks are already using. And then just my little disclaimers at the bottom. For some of the features, you may need access to a cellular plan, so some of them will only work if you have access to the internet at a specific point. And then, as I talked about earlier, one of the things that we do is try to make sure, or if you have Wi-Fi, somebody's pointing out, that's absolutely true. So as long as you have access to Wi-Fi. So a lot of places are offering free Wi-Fi now, so you can go into McDonald's or Starbucks or a lot of places in the community and access free Wi-Fi, so thank you for pointing that out. And then we're looking at feature matching, so I think one of the challenges is that the App Store can be incredibly overwhelming, and trying to keep up with the latest versions of the device and then all of the apps can be a little bit challenging, but if you're really concentrating on the features of what you're looking for. So if, for example, you're working with an individual who has difficulty with time management, really honing in on what that means and then looking for apps that meet that specific person's need. Do they need visuals? Do they need an audio cue? What are the supports that they need? And that really does help you to kind of narrow things down a little bit more in what can be an overwhelming process of selecting some supportive apps. And then last but not least, just remembering that not all apps are available on all devices. So when you go to the App Store now, you'll see a little list usually that says this is available only for the iPad or for the iPad and the iPhone. So just remembering that, not every app is available on every device is helpful. So that's kind of my little disclaimer about all of the Idevices to get you kind of thinking about, again, what people already have a lot of access to. When we talk about apps for communication, so for our folks who have who are nonverbal or have limited verbal ability, I think probably the one that people have heard the most about is the app called Proloquo Go. And that is kind of the gold standard. It also happens to be the most expensive app on the App Store. For a really long time, it's been that way. But for what you get, it's actually a very robust app. And so it allows you to utilize pictures that you already have in your phone or in your device to use the pictures that are already created. It's very, very customizable. And the thing about all of the apps that are out there is they all, again, have very different features that meet the needs of different individuals. So for somebody who has very complex language, who has a lot of information that they want to share with somebody, an app like Proloquo to Go is probably your best solution. There are other apps, and probably the second most popular one that we recommend is an app called Go Talk Now, which is a communication app, but also has the ability to create visual scenes for folks. It has many more limitations in terms of the amount of information that an individual can have access to at any one given point. So it's more for a person who has more limited verbal output, but still a really nice app for some of the folks that we work with. And then certainly, again, this isn't an exhaustive list, but we have a lot of folks on the spectrum that we work with who are actually really good typers and prefer to type out their messages as opposed to using picture symbols to convey messages. And so if you have somebody who's really very proficient at typing and would be able to type out a message and then have it spoken for them, there's an app called Assistive Express for $24.99 that lets folks do that. No bells, no whistles, essentially an on-screen keyboard. You can change some of the parameters of the speech output, but it's essentially I type and I have a way to express what I'm saying via that mechanism instead of photos or icons. So that's my very, very brief overview of apps for communication. Again, we do, full-fledged evaluations that take 10 or 12 hours to identify the correct one for folks. But in terms of finding apps that are kind of just representative of the three types of communicators that we're generally working with, that was the basis for the selection of these in particular. Moving on, we also look at apps that support scheduling and social stories. So this is really a pretty good representation. I think it's always challenging to kind of call a list of hundreds and hundreds of apps down to a few that you can talk about in a couple of minutes. But you'll see that there are lots of different price ranges. We go from free all the way up to $150. And the saying that you get what you pay for is generally true with apps. But I think, again, if you start to look at the nature of the apps that are here, the biggest difference is the amount of support that they provide for an individual. So, again, if you need something that's just a straight out, checklist for what a person might need to do throughout the course of the day, you could probably look at something like the functional planning system, which is $4.99 and essentially allows folks to kind of go in, create a list, a daily, weekly, monthly list, and then be provided with some supports to kind of make their way through that throughout the course of their activities. If you have somebody who relies more on videos as opposed to just pictures, there's an app called Video Scheduler that goes for $12.99 in the App Store, and that allows you to either utilize videos that are already in there or create your own videos to allow folks to kind of make their way through their schedule, or again, if they're in a social situation where they may need some support and some prompting, that's another possibility. Somebody's saying that we've used Daycape, and one of the things you've struggled with is getting your son to use it. He loves technology, but the only thing the app did for him was extend the time it takes to do a task. I think that's true. When we look at supporting folks that are kind of struggling with completing a task, it can be very challenging to kind of inject another layer into that, which is, okay, stop and check your device and see what the next step is. It's really kind of, again, I think that's why there are so many apps that are kind of out there, and I think it's finding something that appeals to somebody from both a visual perspective, the amount of feedback that it gives to folks. They may need auditory cues. some people find auditory cues extremely offensive, and so we need something with more of a visual cue. Are we having some technical difficulties, Kathy?
I think we may be having some technical difficulties. Talk a second, Kelly, and let me see if your mouse is moving.
Okay. Am I moving?
No. I'm going to ask you to turn your webcam off and turn it back on.
Okay.
Is it just Kelly's screen that is a problem? Can people see the slides? Anybody type something in the chat. Okay, Nan can see the slides. Okay, go ahead, Kelly, try talking.
Okay, are we back?
Okay, all right, Max, are the slides still gone? Okay. Max is having difficulties, but it looks like it's just Max. So, Max, I'm going to ask you to play with your controls a minute, and possibly, if you have to leave the conference and come back in. All right, people are saying Kelly's back.
Here I am.
Okay, go ahead, Kelly.
Okay. So again, to the point that folks, there's not one app for everybody, and I think that's probably the biggest challenge for us as evaluators is there are subtle differences in each one of these apps and each of the apps, that I'll list for you today. And if there were one scheduling or social story or communication app, it would be great. It would certainly make life much easier. But again, people respond very differently to things, and especially with the iPad. One of the challenges that we have is that folks are using their devices for many, many different things. And so, sometimes they sit down with it and there's no expectation of anything. They're chilling out and they're doing what it is that they do for a leisure activity using their iPad or, their device. And then other times when we use it, we're putting demands on them or they're expected to complete a task in a certain way. And so I think that's also a challenge when we're talking about a device that does so many things. And so my suggestion, if you find that you're using an app that's not working for a specific task that you're looking to support, I suggest that, you try another app that may have a different feature. I am a voracious reader of all of the reviews on apps because what I find is that people are willing to share both the positive and the negative of what they've learned when they've used an app with somebody. And especially when we talk about folks that are, in the world of autism, we all recognize that there's a lot of variables that impact the way that an individual is using an app. So somebody's asking me the best place to read the reviews. And yeah, in the iTunes store is the best place. If you go to the actual app store and you look at, say that you looked at any one of these things, the visual schedule planner, if you put that in the search box, one of the things that comes up, you'll get the little icon on the left. It will explain to you, who the app developer is, how long it's been around, what devices it's available for. And then one of the things that you can look at is the reviews. And again, people are just really honest. And I really rely on those a lot in terms of determining whether or not it's a good idea to kind of go ahead and make a purchase. A lot of the apps will offer you a free version or what they call a light version. So for example, the CanPlan app that I've mentioned here is a free download, but then if you decide that you like to use it, you can get a paid version of it that allows you to do more in terms of the number of schedules that you store in it or those kinds of things. So I always look for apps that have a free version first so that we can try it with individuals before we purchase it. But certainly reading those reviews is really helpful.
I just mentioned quickly, Kelly, is that frequently during Autism Awareness Month, they have sales on these things. Sometimes Absolutely. They're discounted heavily.
Yes, they are. And there used to be these great apps that allowed you to kind of go in and monitor what was going on sale every day. 6 years ago when the iPad first came out, I had 4 apps on my iPad that I would check every morning, and it would say to you, here's what's free today, or here's, what'll be discounted. And over the years, those have disappeared. But definitely, to Kathy's point, during Autism Awareness Month, you can definitely find some, even just a Google search of, free apps or discounted apps for today. You may be able to find something, but yeah, interestingly enough, those have vanished over the last few years. So, and again, these are just suggestions. So, but hopefully they're a way to get you kind of thinking about looking at the features of each of these apps, and then deciding whether or not they meet the needs of the folks that you're working with. So that's apps for scheduling. Miscellaneous apps. So I just wanted to include a couple of things that are issues that we've come up against when we're working with folks. So things like Money Trainer, using, looking at ways that we can kind of prepare both the younger and the older individuals that we're working with to utilize money, to make change, those kinds of things. There's a great app called Money Trainer. It's $20. There's a great app called the Dream Pad that actually, this is relatively new. You purchase this pillow from this company called Dream Pad, and then you can actually download an app, and what it does is it works in conjunction. You put it inside of the pillow, and it provides listening, basically relaxation audio for folks as they're trying to either just kind of decompress from a situation or as they're preparing for bed. So I just found that really interesting, threw it in there so you guys could take a peek at it. The functional planning system I mentioned in the previous slide, but it's also here for some reason. Shopping lists, getting folks to create shopping lists. There's a great app, this Shopping List 3 for 99 cents, that allows you to actually take pictures of items. So instead of being a visual text list, you can actually take photos of items that you need, which, if you didn't want to purchase the app, we do have some folks that kind of do that, and they just store them in their photo roll, their picture roll on their iPhone or their other iDevice, and when they get to the grocery store, they just scroll through the photos to make sure that they've gotten the things that they need to purchase at the grocery store. So if you don't want to purchase an app, you can always just use your camera. Quick Cues and Everyday Skills are apps. The Everyday Skills is just, it's a little bit pricey. I consider $50 pricey. But it's a great way to look at the kinds of skills that folks are engaging in for just their daily living tasks. So that's that. Quick Cues is basically a way for you to go in and create either visual or audio cues that folks might need to complete tasks. And then Living Safely is an app that allows people to look at safety that occurs in the home. So, what to do in safety situations, create scenarios, and then allows folks to see those kind of play out, and really provides an opportunity for a conversation about safety at home. So those apps are there as well. Okay. So in terms of things to consider, obviously we're looking at access to the internet or Wi-Fi. Staffing levels is important, and whether or not those staff have any training needs related to either the device that an individual is using or to an app that folks are using, so that they can, create those social stories on the fly or do what needs to be done in terms of setting reminders and cues, thinking about those kinds of things. Having some clear expectations about what you expect apps to do and how you expect them to support folks that you're working with. And then it sounds like a lot, but I always feel like an implementation plan is really important. So having a conversation about what those expectations are, who's going to be responsible for what, who's managing devices. So if families have purchased devices for folks, but they're in a group home or those kinds of things, who's updating the device, who has access to the passwords to do that, who has the approval to purchase and download apps. Those kinds of conversations and having a plan for those types of issues is really important, especially when you start talking about assistive technology and integrating any kind of devices into the equation for folks. So, Kathy, I think that's it for me. I think the next slide is actually the smart home piece that you're going to talk about.
I'm going to, let's see. Oh, yes, I can do this on my own. Okay, I don't need control away from you. That's exciting. Okay. All right. Okay, so let me preface this by saying that unlike Kelly, I do not have, deep, long-standing personal experience with smart home technology. That this is more of a result of a fair bit of research I've done over the last few months, but it's not the hands-on kind of experience. Smart home technology is relatively new, and it's still considered somewhat experimental, but it is considered to be something that can facilitate greater independence while maintaining safety, both in the home and beyond. You can have technology that interfaces with the residents. You can have technology that acts independently by itself to stop a dangerous situation or prevent property damage. And there's technology that can interface with support providers. And there are some ethical considerations that go into this. Part of the general consensus is that it needs to be considered through a person-centered planning process, so that there is privacy for the individual and that they have informed consent. Let's see, we've got a couple of questions over here for Kelly before I go too far.
Okay. Yep, I see that. So Randy's asking questions about funded. So funding is different for children who are school-aged and for the adult population, as you can well imagine. So if a child is school-aged and they have an IEP or a 504 plan, it's the responsibility of their school district to provide the funding for both the evaluation, any training that's required, and if the device gets written into their IEP, and by device I mean anything, whether it's a piece of software or it's an actual physical device. If the device gets written, any type of assistive technology gets written into the IEP, it's the obligation of the school department to provide that assistive technology to the individual. So for your K through 12 or 21 population, it's the school department. That being said, they can seek Medicaid reimbursement using a special code that we have for assistive technology that allows them to, using a child's Medicaid dollars with parental consent, they will send the information to Medicaid, and Medicaid will reimburse the school department 53% of the cost of a device or any type of assistive technology. The reason families are really interested in doing that is because the majority of the funding was provided by the child's Medicaid, the child actually owns the device. So if that child gets up and moves between districts or they move from state to state, that child owns the device, and the device and the technology travel with them. As opposed to if a school department funds it and the child leaves the district, then even though the next school district is obligated to provide it, they don't leave with that same device. So for a lot of families, there's an investment in getting school departments to agree to use Medicaid funding, which they don't have to do, but fiscally it makes a lot of sense, so a lot of them do. So that's children. For adult services, in terms of the funding piece for that, as I said, we're right now in the process of waiting for approval from Mass Health We are also in the process of applying for third-party insurance in both Rhode Island and Massachusetts, and then going for concurrently, we're a little bit busy, we're also looking to get Medicaid and Medicare approval. Outside of that, the major funding stream for the adults that we provide services for are through Voc Rehab. And so we are working with individuals who either need assistive technology or communication supports to go to post-secondary training or to be successful and gainfully employed. So Voc Rehab provides most of the adult referrals that we have. And right now, if folks are not receiving funding through Voc Rehab, the only other option that we have is private pay, and that's why we're looking to get the third-party insurances straightened out for adults. So it's a little bit more restricted right now, the way that we have things, but certainly we're hoping to kind of ease the burden on that a little bit for families, because funding is obviously a barrier for a lot of the adults that we serve. So I hope that answers your question. Just let me know if it doesn't, Randy. Diane's question is there a simplified device that's available for an individual who doesn't have the motor skills required to navigate a more technical device? So the quick answer to that, without knowing a lot of the details, would be that if the only issue related to operating a more technical, a more technical or complex device is a physical access, the first thing that we would do is look at whether or not we could do something to improve the physical access. So we might use something like a stand or a mount or a pointing tool like a stylus, whether or not it's a regular stylus or an adapted stylus. If it's something like absolutely, no motor skills, if we're talking about somebody with some really complex motor needs or physical needs, we might look at an alternate access method like a switch or eye gaze. So with the limited information that I have, my suggestion would be that, before we say somebody can't operate a device because of their motor issues, that we look at whether or not we can find an alternate way to access a complex device if, in fact, a complex device is what they need. So I hope that helped, Diane.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Okay, so let's see. Where am I? Okay, so interfacing with the residents, technology that interfaces with residents. And some of this I'll go through reasonably quickly because some of it Kelly already touched on, including scheduling, checklists, step-by-step directions such as daily tasks or recipes. Beyond that, there are some simplified email and web access options. There's secure and social networking options. Environmental controls, such as controlling the lights, temperature. I'm going to have to minimize my camera here so I can see the screen. Doors. There are options for navigation for independent travel in the community. There are apps for decision-making, for answering questions, and there are options for dispensing medication and taking vitals. So some examples of this. With scheduling, AbleLink is sort of a top-of-the-line system for a lot of these things, and they have a very broad menu of options, many of which can interface with each other. And as Kelly said, you get what you pay for, so the more bells and whistles you want, the more it's going to cost. Again, there's functional planning system at $4.95. It's not all things to all people, but it gets you in the door. Touchscreen Solutions is sort of a middle path between the two. It is a customized tablet. They will do an assessment, decide what to load on the individual's tablet. It is delivered to you. It's not an app for a tablet you have. It is a dedicated tablet. I believe the tablet's about $200, and then there's a monthly fee, I think, of about $99. Is that about right, Kelly?
The last I heard, the monthly fee was lower than that, but it's been some time since we had that. one of the things I want to point out about TouchStream, if you don't mind me stepping in for a second, Kathy, is it does also come with, basically it comes with a couple of things. One, it can actually use Bluetooth to connect to a wireless scale. And then it also has the ability to, if somebody takes their blood pressure, it has the ability to record that information, and it also has a med support system. So you can actually use QR codes, and individuals can hold the vial up to the camera in the tablet and verify that they're taking the correct medication. So what's nice about that solution in general is that on the back end of the tablet, it's tied to a website that anybody at any point can edit. So you know, if for example there's a change in the meds and you know the nurse isn't scheduled to go out to the group home for another 2 or 3 days, you know, she can log into the website, put the med change in, and it uploads into the tablet immediately. So information can be put in either from the tablet itself or from a website that you can give access to different people to. And so for something like the blood pressure cuff that it has, or for the scale, you can set parameters that say if this individual, you know, gains or loses X number of pounds, notify the following people. So there's a lot that's built into it. And I believe when we talked to the representative, it was around $60 a month, but that was some time ago. And they may have different packages as well, but there is a monthly fee involved with that.
Yeah. And you'll see that there are a number of things that show up in more than one place on these slides.
Right.
And, you know, TouchStream, yeah, I was blown away by the demo that I went to. Thank you for suggesting it to me, Kelly.
You're welcome.
There's another app called Things from Cultured Code, which is, I think, about just under $10. And it's not designed for people with disabilities. It's just a mainstream app, but it's extremely well reviewed. Again, step-by-step directions, visual impact, another one from AbleLink, and functional planning system again. And then under simplified email and web access, there's something called Endeavor Desktop Pro from AbleLink. Now, I'm very excited about something I just discovered called Community Ties under Secure Social Networking. It's similar to Facebook in the sense that you can have a social wall where you can communicate with people in your network. You can message lots of people or just a single person. There's a calendar function. You can upload files, but it is completely secure. You can't find anybody by searching on it. The only way somebody can join is to be invited. And this is the only one I really do have some hands-on experience with. I've started using this with my son's network at his day program, his group home, family, and also what I call our team to carry on, the backup guardian, the lawyer, etc. And it is just a wonderful thing. And it means I've been able to do things like upload on there the special needs trust. And no, the group home manager doesn't have access to the special needs trust, but the team to carry on does. And if something were to happen, they could simply go on there and access it. Let's see. So that's very exciting. Now, technology that interfaces with the residents, some more examples. Environmental controls, again, controlling lights, temperatures, doors, etc. There's a company in the Midwest called Simply Home, which will do things all over the country. And they have some fairly elaborate control systems above and beyond this. But again, this allows somebody, for instance, who may have a lot of physical mobility issues to do environmental controls from a wheelchair or from a Bluetooth device. Another example of environmental control might be an RFID wristband or a key fob. This is similar to what you'd see in a hotel with a key card, except it's built into a wristband. And so as under home and community-based services, as we're moving to residents of group homes need to have locks on their bedroom doors to be able to access them, this might be an option where somebody wears a wristband that opens their door and only their door. and so their housemates don't have access. Another example, going on to navigation, again from AbleLink. This is pretty exciting. This is a GPS system that provides verbal and visual cues, and you can train somebody to navigate, a bus route through the community. This is how you get to your job. This is how you get to the fitness center. And it's providing cues all the way along, up to and including, you do not get off at this stop. The decision-making, Smart Steps is a new app. It was developed by a special education professional in the Midwest. It uses decision trees with a Q&A ability. So an example might be, I want to talk to somebody. And it would ask questions about, what time is it? Who do you want to talk to? Do you think they're going to be awake? Or it might be, somebody wants me to give them personal information online, and it will walk you through questions there. And it will get to the point where either you've resolved the problem and it says, great job, you solved your problem, or it will say, you need to call somebody. And the free version, it only has 8 built-in decision trees, and that's as far as it goes. For $4.99 a month, there's a version that will save your contacts like a panic button, and also gives you the ability to create your own decision trees and share them with other people through a network. And let's see, on a far more elaborate level, there's something that's not out yet but is coming called Idevices. And this is literally, it's smartphone based. You can ask it questions. So it might be, I want to make tacos. Tell me how to make tacos. And it would come out with a recipe, and it could put ingredients on your shopping list and remind you to go to the store when you get off the bus. I don't know what this is going to cost. I know they're in the process of loading 3,000 plus different questions and answers into it. But it should be coming out probably within the next 12 months. And this is a good point to mention that for a lot of what I'm talking about on the MA Autism, or the MA Housing Think Tank.org website, there are short videos on a number of these items, including Identifor. Kelly also already mentioned the ability with TouchStream to test blood sugar, your weight, blood pressure. Simply Home will do that as well. ePill and Simply Home also have pill dispensers that go a little bit beyond the QR code technology with TouchStream, and literally at a certain time of day they will set off, they will start beeping to tell you it's time to take your meds. They will dispense the actual medication. They can, report if you didn't take it or if it wasn't dispensed. So there are a number of things out there. ePill is a company out of Wellesley. Let's see. Yeah, so that's that. Okay. Then technology that can act independently. Again, Kelly talked about some of this kind of thing with the thing that will stop the pot from boiling over. Some other examples, there's some stove safety sensors. There's something called Home Sensor and something else called iGuard Stove. And both of them will shut off the stove if no motion is detected in the room after a certain period of time. Home Sensor you can find on the Able Data site, not to be confused with the AbleLink site. Able Data is similar to the website you were talking about, Kelly. It's not entirely comprehensive, but it's got a very broad range of items. iGuard Stove is available through a company called Syngistics. Another one called Fire Avert you can find on the Alzheimer's stove. Shuts off the stove if it detects a smoke alarm going off. And that's a fairly new one. It was designed by a firefighter. Magnetic induction cooktops are, a mainstream technology. They are nice because they will shut themselves off if the pot is removed or if water is boiled away. one thing I'm very excited about, Laura's asking about Lutron system for environmental controls. I haven't, but I will. Thank you for the tip. One thing I'm very excited about is water flooding sensors. This has been a big issue in my son's house. I know that a lot of people have this issue. There's something called Flood Stop you can find on plumbingsupply.com that can shut off the water from a toilet or a sink or a dishwasher or what have you if water is detected on the floor. Okay, let's see. Okay, and then there's technology that Kelly already referred to that interfaces with providers themselves. So an example might be a low blood sugar reading that will cause a text alert to be sent or an email or a phone call. Another very interesting technology is call centers. A resident can, it may be only overnight or it could be 24/7. A resident may call themselves, or they might use a panic button, or a sensor may trigger a call from the center to see if someone needs help. In certain cases, support staff may be contacted to respond. And one advantage of a full-blown monitoring system is the ability to make sure the technology is working all the time. Web interfaces allow support providers to check status. Again, TouchStream does that. AbleLink can do that as well. Let's talk quickly about some examples of that. TouchStream we already talked about, so I'll skip over that. Safety Connection is an overnight call center in Vermont. Individuals call in when they're home for the night, and the center alarms doors and windows and smoke detectors. Individuals can call for assistance, and the center can talk them through a situation or contact the support team if necessary. Let's see. Okay. Simply Home, we already mentioned. They provide a call center that can be contacted by an individual or through a panic button or by sensors, and the call center will contact the support provider or the person's family. And then Night Owl Support Systems is very interesting. They use an array of non-camera sensors connected to an overnight monitoring station. So they deliberately set about to do something that would not use cameras, but they will respond to alerts or calls, or contacted again. If they sense that a smoke detector has gone off or that there's water leaking. What they do depends on the person-centered plan for the individual. Let's see, and then putting it all together. There's a service provider in Colorado called Imagine, and beginning in 2005, they started what they call their Smart Homes Initiative. The residents use AbleLink technology for scheduling, step-by-step directions, web surfing, etc. And if you go to the AbleLink website, there's a lot of really interesting videos. In the initial smart homes, the interface with the provider, they used a homegrown project with programmable logic controllers. They said this is not something anybody would ever want to reinvent. In their newer homes, they just use the Simply Home technology. They're also implementing technology to train the staff, to communicate among staff, and to track medication. And that's all I've got. So if folks don't have any other questions, or please folks weigh in with any other questions now. All right. We ran 4 minutes over, but I think, any recommendations for CCTV systems? I don't know enough to answer the question, but it sounds like Laura Shrestha has an answer. Go ahead, Laura. I will unmute you. Hold on. Laura, can you give me your phone number, because it's got you by phone number, not by area, not by your name. In the meantime, Randy, who funds the ATUs in a group residence? There's $1 million question.
Yes, that is $1 million question. I can tell you what our experience has been with that, and there are a couple of different mechanisms that are used. for that. Sometimes they're paid for privately. If an individual has access to funds or a family chooses to do that, that's obviously always an option. Some of the group homes that we've worked with in Rhode Island have access to funding that kind of seems to come and go, and I'm not quite sure how it works, but individual group homes have also paid for assistive technology. If it's an older individual who is in need of a communication device, then what usually happens is, even if we're looking for a funding source for the actual evaluation, we write evaluation reports that indicate medical necessity for communication. So if it's a communication device, usually it's the individual's Medicaid or Medicare that comes into play as far as paying for the equipment itself. It's tricky. As I said, funding in the adult world is a little bit more complex than it is for our school-age kids. But there are some funding options out there.
Okay. Laura Shrest, I'm going to unmute everybody for a minute.
The conference has been muted. The conference has been unmuted.
Okay,
Hi,
Laura, go
Laura
ahead.
The one talking right now, I promise. But as I was saying, we did a design competition for high functioning people for 24/7 residential community for autism, and I was able to find a couple of technologies. One being a TV, which is a 3-in-1 touchscreen that could be used to project images on the floor, on the wall, or to take with you. It would help during triggers or meltdowns. We found 2 units, one called the Yoga Tablet by Lenovo, which was good. Another larger unit that could be stayed at home was the Tobii, Tobii, by Sensory Guru. It's a 3-in-1 touchscreen. It's like the size of an actual TV, which was able to project on the floor as well. The Yoga is an on-to-go tablet that you can take with you. We also found, as I said, the Lutron touch thing that could be tied to your iPad. A lot of these were things that you can tie to your iPad that you could have control over, which was the Lutron system for blinds, for lighting, for air conditioning, for all those kind of things. And we wanted to tie it into the TV so that you could bring up a calendar and touch each thing as you go along, that you finished this task, you finished that task. So it would help keep people on track. But we found a whole bunch of different technology that could be used. We know looking at people in the eye is something hard to do. So we found a flooring tile that if you were to walk into a residential home, the flooring tile would be an LED light up underneath the carpet that can tell you where to go and what it is, so you wouldn't have to have that burden of looking up and looking.
In about 2 minutes I'm going to go in to make lunch.
Yeah. So, and it's called the Undercarpet Lighting System Tiles by Philips. Philips just sent that out. So we have found things, especially for light sensitivity, like architects are now looking into putting bioluminescence.
Why don't you go with David? He'll make you a sandwich or just cheese.
Putting it on concrete.
Because I'm not really hungry, so.
Hold on, I'm unmuting you again. I muted the wrong. I finally figured out who you are. I'm going to mute everybody else and unmute you again.
The conference has been muted.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we found a couple of other things like bioluminescence in countertops for wayfinding at night, or for those who have light sensitivity during the day. We found the luminescence also works in concrete outside, so instead of having spot pathways, you could actually use the bioluminescence so you don't have that glare and that instability of the lights as you walk through. It was a very interesting project, and I was able to find a lot of technology. A lot of it I wasn't able to use, but a lot of it I still have the research for. But my goal is to make it like ADA has a code system I'm trying to make a code system for silent disabilities so that people could start using these codes to make it easier for people in built environments, because we know that the hardest thing for you guys is transitioning. Transitioning is the hardest by far, especially in and out of buildings and down hallways. So that's what my thesis is aimed towards, is how to figure out how to get people to be able to transition into a building, out of a building, and down hallways, and sensory rooms, of course. So I was able to get a lot of information about that.
Thank you. Max, I want to answer your question about whether DDS will fund technology under autism, and I think it is going to depend on the individual and the situation. So certainly if somebody's using individual supports and they're self-directing their funding, you know, if you can pay for horseback riding with it, I'm pretty sure you can pay for technology with it. But in a group home setting, that is another question. And I think, you know, not enough people have asked the question yet. And I think that it's a very important question. The other thing, as it relates to some of the technology that Laura was just talking about, for instance, or some of the smart home technology, I think it's worth trying to make an argument to the home modification loan program. That's a program through Mass Rehab, and you can borrow, a landlord can borrow up to, I think, $30,000 one time only for a property. So if you're going to do something, you've got to figure out everything you want to do at the first shot. And that's to make the property accessible for the needs of the individual. Traditionally, it's used for things like ramps, but it's been used for soundproofing. And, you know, I don't think there's any good reason you couldn't make a case for using it for smart home technology.
The best way to go about that would have a person that does human health come into your house and do an evaluation of the disability and what you have in your home, and what's there now and what would be needed to upgrade your home, and they can give you an estimate on the technology you would need and the how much it's going to cost to put that in. I've done that for a person with MS and doing a couple who has dwarfism now, but mine was for autism for the design competition. So it would be a design matrix.
Let's see. Okay, two things. One, quickly, just home modification loan program. Bear in mind that's a loan, not a grant, and you do eventually have to pay it back. If you're a landlord who's not a family member, you start paying back immediately, and it's at 3%. If you're a landlord who's a family member, it's 0%, and you have to pay it back when the title of the property changes, I think. Nan Leonard is asking Laura Shrestha if you have any written information on that. Laura, if you're willing to get that to me, I can get it out to participants. Or actually,
the 24/7 thing that I sent you a couple of weeks back.
Right.
I mean,
okay. I will. If you're okay with me sharing that.
Yeah. It was a design competition for Autism Speaks for House to Home, so it's fine to share. It has a lot of the research that we did. It doesn't have all of it, but it has a lot of the technology that I looked into. Not everything, but I'm going to be at the meeting on Saturday, so if anybody wants to see what it is I'm trying to do, I can talk after the meeting. So.
All right. All right. Okay. So we're 15 minutes over, so I'm going to suggest we go ahead and wrap it up, and I should have the slides up and the recording of the webinar both up on the MA Autism Housing Think Tank.org website. I think it's MA Housing Think Tank, sorry, .org website by tomorrow. So, and that's about it. And I will also send an email to folks with that information from Laura Shrestha. Okay. Thank you very much for participating.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.